So just in general, his tone on diversity, women, racial groups, LGBTQ+, disability, not great on any of it. Not that you can really set any of that aside, but if you were to set that aside and eliminate all of that from his content, I still didn't find it funny. Welcome to Chez, Genèse, the place of new beginnings. My name is Catherine Hubert, and I founded and own a French-inspired cafe where, as a team, we are on a mission to change the way that our world understands neurodiversity and employs humans with disabilities. Our restaurant was born and is based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we practice and teach our mission and model. This is our channel where we dive in deep to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Our hope is that this content is empowering to disabled and non-disabled humans alike, and that no matter what perspective you are coming from, employer, employee, parent, friend, or Chez Genèse fan, you feel welcomed, you learn something new, and you walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding of humanity. Okay, based on the recommendation of one of my teammates, going to watch the Gillis stand-up monologue from SNL. This was a couple of weeks ago. I got a text afterwards being like, you need to check this out. And I haven't watched it yet, so I'm gonna do that today. We'll just kind of film my general reactions, and then I'm gonna go in later and actually talk about some things more. That's just a heads up there. Okay, I don't actually know who this person is. I'm gonna have to do some research on him. Not loving this so far.
You remember that when you were a little boy and you loved your mom and you thought she was the cool? You remember when you were gay?
Oh God.
You were just a gay little boy? Every little boy is just their mom's gay best friend. There's zero difference. I was gay for my mom. She would pick me up from school. I'd hop in the van. I'd be like, girl, tell me about your day.
Well, this is not, I'm not liking this. This is cringy. That's because you don't have any material, period. That's not the caveat. Like, I don't have any material that can be on TV. I don't have anything that couldn't get me canceled if it went online. So therefore, I don't have anything to put on TV. Wow. Okay, part 2. This is at minute like 4:25.
My niece has Down syndrome, and I thought that was going to get a bigger laugh.
Which part? The guy with the in the band with the saxophone player, I don't know his name, but he's been in the SNL band for a really long time. He is so unimpressed. I'm really digging his lack of interest that's happening here.
And then adopted 3 black kids. Then she finally got pregnant, and now she has a kid with Down syndrome. And her husband is from Egypt. He's an Arab guy. You go over to their house, it's like getting in the craziest Uber pool you've ever been in.
God. Oh my God.
My family and I, we opened a coffee shop in my hometown for people with Down syndrome to work at. It's going exactly how you think it would go. It's doing well, actually. Line around the corner every day. Not because there's like a ton of people going, but service is.
Oh boy.
Everyone's getting apple juice. We don't know how to fix that problem.
Oh boy. Okay. We have many thoughts and feelings about that. I'm gonna sit with my thoughts and feelings for just a second because I'm gonna need to get my brain around that. My first thought, aside from the things that he said about women and people of color and people with disabilities, is just that anytime a comedian is self-deprecating in an attempt to get laughs out of insecurity, like those things going together over and over again. It was like, oh, I thought you were gonna think that's funny. Oh, I can see you not enjoying it. I can see, like, he's delivering material and content that he can tell is not necessarily landing with his audience, but instead of changing the content, it's kind of a doubling down on it and like trying to draw laughs out of his discomfort with the fact that people didn't just laugh at him. Even if he hadn't said anything controversial, this is not my comedic style that I like. Like, I love comedy. I know the people who were hating on me after my Matt Rife video would beg to differ. I love comedy. I love stand-up. I have some comedians that I think are incredible. But the thing that I like the most about comedy is the ability to take, like Trevor Noah is one of my favorite comedians. Oftentimes he takes subject matter that an audience would oftentimes not be willing to listen to, and through comedy delivers it in a way that becomes very approachable, and his audience then is able to receive it. And so I think that there can be so much power in comedy, not just because laughter is really powerful, but because you can hear something through the lens of comedy that you may not otherwise be able to hear. So that being said, like there are a lot of opportunities within the subject matter that he dealt with that, given a different lens and perspective, could have been very funny and could have drawn a lot of awareness and empathy to some things that instead he was just poking fun at and going kind of for the cheap laugh instead of a more thought through and elevated laugh. Okay, I'm gonna think on that. We'll come back in a little bit to talk more about it. All right, this is going to be more of the official response to my reaction, my in-person reaction to Shane Gillis and his SNL monologue that was from a couple weeks ago. I wasn't familiar with who he was, and he even made a comment about that early on in his monologue, and then said that he had been hired as a castmate for the show several years ago. He got fired. He was like, if you don't know who I am and you don't know that I didn't get fired, don't look it up. I was like, anybody who says that wants you to look it up, right? So I went and looked it up. He was only on the show for a very short period of time and then got fired for racial slurs. Kind of interesting that they brought him back as a host. That seems like an odd choice to me. If you fire someone, why would you bring them back as a host? All that to say, we're reacting to his monologue. I mean, there are several things you can see through my reactions that I wasn't amused by any of it. So regardless of the portions of his monologue that I felt like were disrespectful, not just towards people with disabilities, he was also fairly just stereotypically pigeonholing towards women. He had several homophobic comments in there, which is something that he's also been called out for in the past. So just in general, his tone on diversity, women, racial groups, LGBTQ+, disability, not great on any of it. Not that you can really set any of that aside, but if you were to set that aside and eliminate all of that from his content, I still didn't find it funny. So there's that. It's coming from that lens. I will say here as a reminder, a preface to this is my perspective. I get to decide if something's funny to me or not, and it's okay for me to talk about it. That does not mean that you have to hold the same opinion or agree with the things that I have to say. It's just to say this is my own stance. This is what I drew from it. I'm here to comment on it. You are welcome to do the same, but I'm coming with it from that perspective. So all that being said, let's talk about it. One of the first things that I noticed when I was watching this, like there's the video and then there's the caption down below, and it said something about, he talks about, and there were like listed 3 different things, and at the very end it said a coffee shop that he owns, or a coffee shop, something like that. And I was like, disability is going to come in around the coffee shop. I could already sense that, and I was correct. So I wish I'd said that in my reaction, been like, interesting, I think that's going to come back later. I didn't, but that did end up being a part of his comedy segment towards the end. So we'll talk about that kind of again in a minute when we get into more of what the bias was that was being represented here. But that's just right away I observed that. I thought that's going to play somehow into his conversation about disability. I was assuming that there was conversation about disability in this because one of my teammates sent me this video and said, you need to watch this. So I was already paying attention or looking out for that, and that was just kind of my, I guess, a flag of awareness that went up at the beginning. Like, I think this is going to tie in later. Which, as I think, points to culture and where we are culturally in terms of the employment opportunities that are actually available to humans with disabilities. As I was watching it, I was about 2/3 of the way in, I think, before he really started getting to more of his disability-related content. I'd already picked up on the fact that, 1, I don't know anything about you, but I do know that you were fired, so red flag there. 2, the way that he handled the audience responses and then his own discomfort with their responses. It showed an inability, I think, to actually connect with an audience, and he was able to perceive that what they were laughing at or not laughing at wasn't really tracking with what he had planned for the evening. But it seems like, knowing SNL, if he'd worked there before, knowing what it is as a show, knowing what the audience potentially might be, that he could have planned or prepared better for the segment than he did. Granted, I don't really know how much of it he wrote, how involved SNL was in the process. I know oftentimes there's a combination of the two when people are on Saturday Night Live, so it could be that not all of it was his material and his content. Given the nature that stand-up is his thing, I would assume that most of it was original to him. It didn't seem like jokes that had been written for him or about him. It seemed more like jokes that he was presenting. But all that to say, I did notice a tone of disrespect. I don't even know if that's the right word, but I'm going to use it because I don't feel like I have a different one. But there was a tone of disrespect as a whole. I felt like for himself, for his audience, for the show, for people of color, for women, for the LGBTQ plus community, for disabled humans. Like the tone just overall was coming certainly from a place of insecurity, bringing himself down, bringing other people down around him. Not that I think self-deprecating humor can be funny at times, and it can be a helpful tool, a survival tool, especially if you're trying to push through an embarrassing moment. But it just, like, he made a joke at one point about how he seems like a 15-year-old boy in a grown man's body. And I would agree with that just in terms of maturity and development. He just seemed like he wasn't comfortable in his own skin, and as a result, he just kind of like takes everybody down with him, is what it felt like. So that seemed to be consistent throughout all of it. It also felt like his jokes just weren't necessarily super well thought through and planned. So that's more of just a commentary on him as a comedian as a whole. But when it comes to disability, we're going to talk about a couple of biases that were particularly strong in his content. The first one is going to be the bias that disability has a specific look. This came up particularly because he was talking about Down syndrome, and there are physical characteristics that are similar and that are noticeable and identifiable as Down syndrome. But in the jokes that he was making about Down syndrome, there were moments where I thought he is saying something here that is true and that is positive, and also he's saying it in an overall broad context of negativity. So an example would be when he talked about someone with Down syndrome being the happiest person that he knew, or the person who was doing the best in his circle. I'm like, that very well may be true, and that is a positive thing. And also the context that you're saying that in, like, even if that comment in and of itself was positive or affirming of someone with Down syndrome, you're saying it in a broader context that implies that that person is happy because they have a lower IQ, they aren't as smart, they don't understand what's going on around them, they live in their own world. Then he made comparisons to himself, his niece with Down syndrome looking like him, and also with the other comments and jokes he'd made earlier, then that implying that it's because he looks kind of dumb or immature, that he doesn't fit in his own body, all of those kind of things. So that's where there were some moments where I'm like, the thing that you just said there, that wasn't a slam against someone. And also when connected to the other themes and the other commentary that you have here, it still is. Like, there's bias wrapped up even within the affirmations, which felt like a missed opportunity either for a more thought through, planned out, considerate comedy or joke opportunity, or an opportunity to actually just affirm who someone is instead of using it as reinforcement of a dig that you'd already made. And then lastly, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. We're going to talk about two basically. I'm like, first and second and lastly, we're going to talk about the bias that disabled humans aren't capable. And that came through very strongly when he was talking about the coffee shop that his family owns that employs people with disabilities, maybe people specifically with Down syndrome. That part wasn't completely clear, I don't think, and I need to go and research what the coffee shop actually is. But his comments about, one, that there's a line around the door, like around the block, and it's not because it's so popular, it's because the employees are so slow and so bad at their jobs that it takes that long for people to get through the line. Then commenting that everybody just gets served apple juice And then his comment that people with disabilities or people with Down syndrome are just like everybody else. So I was like, okay, where are you going with this? And then it was like, because they also hate their jobs. And I was like, oh my gosh. I would hate my job too if the person who hired me is making jokes on television about how bad I am at my job. Like, that's not a work environment that you want to be in. And also, not every person with a disability wants to work in a coffee shop. So that's where it's like there's multiple layers here that are problematic and that point to bigger cultural themes and ideas. And it just swept all of that to the side underneath the bias that all of that is because humans with disabilities aren't capable of doing good work. They're not good at their jobs. They don't want to have jobs. That there's a bias there that someone with a disability is lazy. So that really bothered me on multiple levels. One, I didn't find it funny because I don't think it's true. To me, comedy is funny because it's pointing out something that's true in a surprising way that maybe your brain hadn't thought of before. This was not surprising and it's not true. But secondly, I was like, but if you're one of the owners of this, like, what's the point? Why the hell are you doing this in the first place if you don't actually believe in it? Oh, that could be a whole separate conversation. I won't go into all of that today, but it felt really frustrating on multiple levels. Anyways, that bias felt very strong, and it's blaming the disabled person and not the culture and the world for being ableist and biased and discriminatory. So, all right. Yay! All of you love to watch me talk about how something that was supposed to be funny is not actually funny. I think that's going to do it for today. Thoughts, comments, put them down below. If you're just hating on me, I'll just tell you right now, I'm not going to respond. But if you want to have an actual conversation about it, bring it on. I would love to talk about it. And if you have suggestions, I love the feedback from people like, hey, you got to check this out, watch this. You're helping broaden my cultural lens and introducing me to things that I hadn't seen before. So keep that coming too. But that's it. Thanks for being here. We'll see you soon. Oh, and this is your friendly reminder to please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you. We thank you for being here. Subscribing, liking, commenting, all of that helps get our content in front of more viewers and helps our business grow. And we're so grateful. Chez Genèse teammates, your keyword for this week is eclair.